on-field progression with these NWSL clubs. Now that the players are back in market playing with their clubs, let's start positive. We're going to start on the positives here, Lori, because some players are continuing to impress, to be playing lights out, to continue to elevate their game and just be really, really outstanding. I know Ashley Sanchez and Trinity Rodman, to me, come to mind playing for Washington Spirit. Trinity Rodman had a brace this weekend. Ashley Sanchez had a goal. Ashley Sanchez had an assist for Trinity Rodman. What about these two players specifically? Let's start with them. Ashley Sanchez, Trinity Rodman. What's standing out? Why are they continuing to be so great with club and country?
Well, because they are really good players, right? To begin with, there's a lot of talent between those two. I think with both of these, I mean, Sanchez in particular, more time than Trinity with the on field with the women's national team more recently. I think that's helped gain her confidence and being able to contribute and I think really understand how she can influence this Washington Spirit team, and she needs to, even if she's a young player. And then I think for Trinity Rodman, I mean, the ceiling is so high, right? And right now, I think she's been in with the national team a few times, not a ton of minutes, and this is a player that just is going to continue to work through like being even the most consistent player she has, much like, or she can be much like a Sanchez, right? Just understanding that it is important to be consistent. She has to be consistent, regardless of your youth at this point in time, because we know that they can contribute. So, but the partnership as well is really intriguing. Like they great friends, it seems, according to social media.
Their celebrations after they score goals.
Yeah.
They always have like a cool dance. Lori, we'll get on that, right? We'll come up with a dance. We'll throw it on our Attacking Third TikTok.
There will be one on Attacking Third for sure. Get Sandra up in here too.
Yes, we need her.
But yeah, and so I think there's just like a genuine partnership there, and that shines off the field, but also that really shines on the field as well and brings out the best in them. So exciting for those two, and important to for the Spirit to not play their best game, but still be able to get results, and those two to be able to shine in those moments as well.
Looking specifically at Washington Spirit, because there's a number of players that translate from Washington Spirit to the national team. There's 7 of them, right? I mean, Andy Sullivan didn't get time this weekend. She was listed questionable. Chris Ward, head coach for Washington Spirit, did say after the match that she was available to play, but he chose to rest her along with Dorian Bailey. But Andy Sullivan specifically, I mean, there's Emily Sonnet, who did get minutes in this most recently in this weekend, but between Sanchez, Hatch, Rodman, Andy Sullivan, Kelly O'Hara, there's just so many players that are building this consistency in this relationship. I think the partnership between Kelly O'Hara and Trinity Rodman has also been developing a lot at the Washington Spirit level, which hopefully will translate to the national team level if both of those players continue to be called in. But you mentioned Rodman. She's not getting a lot of minutes at the national team, but that's not affecting her confidence with Washington Spirit by any means. I think she knows what kind of player she can be. She does have that partnership with Sanchez, even Hatch up top. They have that really good relationship to be able to be really lethal in that front line. How does Rodman continue to get call-ups to the national team and get more minutes under Vlatko Andonovski? Because we really haven't seen that from Rodman.
Yeah. I mean, it's still early, right? Rookie year last year, and really started to come alive the second half of the season, and then has gotten called in. But as you mentioned, not as many minutes. So I think for Rodman, it's continuing to have the performances she had last night. I mean, in some ways, the game seems so easy to her, which is amazing. But she, we know her athletic ability. We know, but like, there's so much more to her. She can create in isolation. She can create in combination. She scores some like just wonderful goals that we saw even last night. So, these performances on a consistent basis, right? And patience, because as we've talked about, even leading up to the last international window last week, there's a real big depth, and I'll say issue, that's for Vlatko, on the or lack of depth issue. There's so many players up in the attack for the women's national team. So it depends on, one, who you're playing with, and then on the national team, right? And also what's needed sometimes in that game. Now, I'm not going to say he's not going to go with a consistent lineup, right? And we saw that him go with the same front three from back-to-back games against Uzbekistan. But, we're the three of Malpew, Macario, and Smith. Then you add in Kristen Press, who's looked good, who was out for COVID protocol, though, this week. Alex Morgan, a goal and assist these last two games. So you don't even have Megan Rapinoe in that mix yet, or that conversation, right? As she's working her way back. So Tobin Heath as well. So, listen, you have three lines that could be playing for a World Cup team that we have in terms of depth up there. So continue her performances, consistency, and patience, because then her time will come. And I think it'll become clearer on where she stands kind of in the mix and what Flacco's looking for.
It is crucial to remember that Trinity Rodman is so young. This is her second year in the league. She's getting her first caps with the national team. She just got her very first goal at the international level when they played here in Philly against Uzbekistan. You mentioned this front three for Vlatko Andonovski that he wanted to get consistent minutes with. It's Sophia Smith, Mallory Pugh, and Kat Macario. Sophia Smith, this is another player that returned to Portland Thorns in her NWSL club team this past weekend. 2 goals she's able to get for Portland, a player that is all over the pitch. And the confidence is growing. I actually really liked what I saw from Sophia Smith this past weekend with Portland against San Diego versus maybe what I saw when she plays for the national team. And perhaps they're asking different roles of her and different duties of her, whether she's with Portland or with the national team. But the opening goal that Sophia Smith scored for Portland, fantastic. We haven't seen that level of confidence from her at the national team level yet, but I think it's translating, because getting 2 starts in this most recent April friendly window, being a player that Vlatko Andonovski said, I'm looking at you. I want consistent time from you. I want consistent play from you that continues to be elevated, and a relationship building with Pugh and Macario. And we saw that from Smith, and now it's translating back to Portland.
Yeah. I agree completely with that. This is a great start to this 2022 campaign for Sophia Smith. No doubt about it. However, though, I kind of actually think, when I think about those front three for the women's national team, and I think Macario and Pugh, listen, this can change pretty easily depending on injuries, depending on people's form, right? So even though April 18th, you're hearing it here first, everybody, that, come in 2 months, when Vlatko around that time is going to have to start to really look into, the next window, and then also announce the team for qualifiers. I think right now, Macario and Pugh have those 2 spots locked down way more than Sophia Smith. I think that position for Sophia Smith is potentially the most wide open. Not that she hasn't been great and hasn't had the performances and scored goals with the women's national team. And as you just mentioned, taking that back to Portland and vice versa, right? Her confidence for Portland and going in with the national team that the same way. I just think the other 2, Macario in particular, the form that she's in, what she brings, and a little bit more versatility in that withdrawal number 9, and how she, in the current form that she's in, both for club and country. And also Pugh, having performed at this level, knowing what you're going to get from her, and the kind of rejuvenation of her play. Smith hasn't been tested in those moments.
Right.
And she hasn't really been tested in a consistently, sorry, I'm tired, consistently with teams that are going to maybe sit back a bit more too. And until we see that, and her ability to be able to add something else, then I do still think that is open. And that's when you open up the conversation to those veteran players, or a Trinity Rodman sneaking in there, right? And so I think that is something to look out for.
What about Ashley Hatch? Is she in that conversation?
Oh, certainly. I really like Hatch too. And she's different than anybody we've ever mentioned. I think it's just tough, because if they're looking at Macario, it's not a like for like, right? So it depends on what you're looking for in the game. And in those moments too, depending, you could always drop Kat back as a number 10, and then you bring in a Hatch, right? But it's like everybody else. It's like Alex Morgan, because I do think, and this is what we can talk about this later too, but I do think that Alex is better in that number 9 in that central role. And we've been seeing her in San Diego out wide more. But however, with Hatch, she's a true number 9 as well. And it's going to be important that she's consistently scoring goals because that's what they're on the field for. And with Washington Spirit, with the amount of names that you just mentioned, those expectations need to be really high for that club and for all those players, because you have basically close to a women's national team starting lineup. And so you need to be held accountable for that, essentially, right? And
exactly. And we're going to talk about it now. We're not talking about this later. Looking at this front line, I mean, if you have Pugh and Macario in as locks and that third spot is up for grabs between Alex Morgan, Kristen Press. I mean, you just mentioned Ashley Hatch. That's more of that number 9, but could Alex Morgan play in the width alongside Macario and Pugh? Is that a good threesome up top? Would you rather see Press up there? What about Tobin Heath? When you look at the play of Alex Morgan with San Diego, Kristen Press with Angel City, although she didn't play this past weekend on COVID protocol right before the match happened, and then Tobin Heath with Arsenal, of those 3 veterans that we've seen get minutes this year, because Megan Rapinoe has yet to play for OL Reign in the NWSL due to injury. Of those 3, which one do you think would fit in best alongside Macario and Mallory Pugh based on skill set, experience, and what they can bring as a group of 3 in the attack?
Yeah, I mean, we can't forget even Purse is in that conversation as well. I personally think Purse has to show more with Gotham and again influence the same.
And Rodman.
Oh yeah, certainly. Yeah. I mean, no, you're exactly right. At this point in time, I would probably go with, and this is why I was bummed. I mean, I hope Kristen Press is okay. However, I was bummed not to see her in that game against OL Reign yesterday, because I think that would have been interesting. I know they played a couple weeks or a month ago or so, but I would probably go with a Pugh, Macario, and Press right now. And Press would start, and then it would be like a battle to get on the field as a sub between Smith and a Rodman right now for one of those wing positions. And no, I wouldn't put Alex out wide with the national team.
So you would prefer Alex in the 9? That was my question.
Yeah. So then that's when it comes to like who's scoring goals, who is contributing to their club, and between like a Hatch and an Alex, because I wouldn't really necessarily say that they're very similar either, but the qualities in which they play the game are more similar than you would say like a Macario with them.
Yes, that makes sense. Right. So when you look at the difference in the number 9 striker between Kat Macario and Ashley Hatch, Trinity Rodman has played there as well, but Blacko likes her out wide. And then an Alex Morgan, Macario wins that race right now.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that. I'm laughing because I was thinking about this before, at least. And I was thinking like, okay, like if everyone's healthy, this is hilarious, because there's just like
same problem.
And like, yeah. And you could also like have the same problems in the back too. Like the main area that's a little bit thin right now, which seems unusual because it has been like one of the more, like where we've had to see the competition like so stiff, is midfield. And that seems to be like not my favorite performances right now. So, and we've seen a few injuries.
Yes.
So that'll be interesting. But yes, right now I would go Pugh left, Macario, Press at this current moment, 3:18 p.m. Eastern time.
I love it.
April 18th, right? That would be my first. And then you would have a Trinity Rodman, and you have Smith coming off the bench fighting for those spots.
I love that. I love that different rotation. And I think having it be such a tight race right now between those players and who could get called in, who will be on the roster, because although you're saying Press, she hasn't been called into the most recent national team camps, the last 2 that have happened. But she's definitely still in that mix. And Vlatko Andonovski said he wanted Press to get time playing in market. I mean, she hadn't played in months leading up to this NWSL Challenge Cup, and now she's getting consistent minutes with Angel City. It's almost a shame that she's on Angel City because they're not doing that well, and it makes her shine a little bit brighter. But imagine what she could be doing if she is playing alongside a Macario, a Pugh, with Rose Lavelle and behind. So those are things I am very, very excited to see moving forward and looking at that